Mix It With Mic plugin of the week comes from Universal Audio is the API Vision Channel Strip. This is an update. It's a features video, a features overview. There is no audio examples. Repeat, no audio examples in this video. So let's go through it here. Essentially with this new release from, as of this video anyway, new release, what we have is the API Vision Strip. And what part of the main adaptation of it, like they've done with some of the others, like the E-Series channel strip, was to emulate the preamp section and also the output electronics. But they've also added some additional features into this from the original setup. And one of the major adaptations of this is that you can insert it in an insert point called console, which would allow you to put this and basically have in your Luna setup, in your Luna system. This works only for, well, this setup I'm talking about right now works only for Luna, and then I'll explain how it adapts here into a DAW, because this is Pro Tools, obviously, through a console insert, and that would give you basically an API console across your desk, and then you could go through and sort of globally switch between the different sections, right? The input-output section with filters, the gate compressor section, etc., and the EQ section. So what we have here is one other addition is the API preamp. So this is the preamp only. So very much like the Neve preamp, right, which gives you the 1073 preamp and as an isolated item. This is also available here, not just in Luna, but in any DAW. So you can work with it that way. So that gives you great tonal coloration, gives you a nice option to go against the Neve preamp if you use that. I love the Neve preamp. Also love this one. We'll get to that in the audio examples video. So that's here, and essentially what you have is the mic preamp section here. So you have gain. If you're in the UA system, you could put it on as a unison preamp, right, and operate it there, and then it would connect to the hardware preamp selection, which would change the settings here. And then you also have a line amp control here. You have a pad, high pass filter, phase invert, and then you could switch the input between mic and line. Okay, so I'm going to close that out because it's pretty much that simple. There's an output gain control here, so that way you could drive it for saturating, for clipping, etc. And all of this works with oversampling, etc. So you get a little bit more of the richness without the aliasing. What I have here on this are the two versions of the API. So what we have is the original version of the previous version, now called the legacy version, which you can see here. And in that one, the distinctive difference here is in the output section, right? In input section and the output section. But I'll get to more because you can see here that there's the 560 over here on the right. So what you have is just an output control, which is just a digital output control, and an input gain, right, which doesn't give you any tonal coloration. So here they give you that full mic pre-circuit, the 212L. And they actually went ahead and they did the full output path as well. So you get any kind of coloration and the linearities or non-linearities of the fader that's used on the actual strip. So you get a little bit of that's in there. And most of the stuff is the same, but I'll kind of go through it and kind of talk about it. So but the primary differences, between all of this stuff are, one is the preamp section, the fader section, but also the ability to have two EQs. So you have the same 550L, right? So it's the 550, basically the 550B, but the L is just sort of a different fit. So it's not like a 500 series. I think it's a little bit narrower than that, but it basically is the design of the that's used in the Vision console itself. Vision console was released in 2003, the API Vision console. It was emulated, the first one here, which is now the legacy version, was emulated by Universal Audio back in 2013. And obviously this is the current release in 2021. So I'm going to close this out here, and let's just kind of focus in on some of the things here and get to some of the details. So what you get with the mic amp, if you're just using it in a normal DAW. So when you purchase it, if you have Luna, then it will just show up there, which is great. It'll also show up in your DAW, so you get both for use in both applications. So whatever DAW you're using, if you happen to be on Windows, Mac, or whatever, you use Pro Tools, use Studio One, Cubase, whatever, etc., then this becomes available. So you get the tonal coloration of this, and you also get the clipping of the output section as well. So that emulation, and I'm going to feature that in the audio examples video, where we'll do a comparison with the exact same settings on the legacy strip and a new strip, so that you can kind of hear the differences between them and just see how that makes a difference in terms of the quality of the emulation. In terms of the way that this is working, you basically have an input, right, that you can go to here with your gain controls there, 30 to 65. There's no negative gain. It goes to plus 12, but there's a pad switch, and the pad will work for both the line and the mic preamp. If you have it set in the line preamp, it's minus 6 dB. If you have it on the mic preamp, it pads down 20 dB. And obviously, if you're using it in a unison preamp and a UA Apollo interface or whatever, then that would be sort of suitable for recording something that might be high gain. The high pass filter, pretty straightforward, 50 hertz, 6 dB per octave, so pretty soft. Phase reverse is pretty straightforward. So that's your whole input section. This is all the same as before. Essentially what you have here is low pass, high pass filter. The one thing that's interesting here is that the high pass filter actually doesn't start at 20K like listed here. When they've measured it out on the console itself, it starts at 40K. So they emulated that and made it part, and because there's oversampling involved, it will actually preserve that. Or if you're going up and recording and working at a 96 kilohertz sample rate, then that would be preserved. Obviously, if you're at 44.1, 48, probably not going to make a difference here because it's going to get truncated off. And then you have the low pass filter. So the high pass filter is 12 dB per octave. The low pass filter is 6 dB per octave, and you can assign it to the side chain of the compressor and gate section. Now that light didn't come on because the section isn't on, right? So once I engage the sections here, then, well, that should work. Well, okay, I did something else wrong, so I guess we'll figure it out somewhere along the way. So that should engage. Moving along here to the 235L section, we have a gate section here, threshold, pretty straightforward. The depth is basically the range control, right? How far down does it drop? You have two attack times, fast and N. When I looked at N, I thought, what is N? And they call it normal, right? So the fast attack is very fast. I think it's like something like 20 microseconds, something like that, 100 microseconds, and 25 milliseconds for the normal attack time on the gate, right? So basically give you a soft attack, hard attack. Soft attack works better for things that are softer sounds, so you don't get a clip or a glitch when it kicks in. So it's good for that. If you're asking why would you want to have an attack like that, for percussive stuff, the fast attack would obviously be better. You could work it in gate mode or expander mode. So expander mode, it works like on a 1:2 ratio. So it's a much softer gating, whereas the gate works, more like, and I can't remember what the number is, like 80:1 or 100:1 or something like that, or 1:100, where it drops down pretty significantly. There's also an interesting switch here. There's a hold and a release control. So the holds were something, I believe that feature was added in by Drummer. That's the first one I ever remember seeing one on. And so once the threshold is exceeded, it would hold on to the signal for a certain amount of time after the signal falls back through the threshold, right, and starts to close. Before it closes, it will hold on to it to a certain amount of time before going back to release. And so when you put it in gate hold mode, then this actually becomes the amount of time it holds on to the signal. So it will give you a different effect. You're more likely to use less range in working like that, but it would give you kind of a different feature. So you would have that. You could work in gate hold or release. And then the on-off switch. Pretty straightforward. Down here, we have the compressor section, the 225L, right? Fast, medium, and slow attack. Okay, so if you're working with that, the attack time are on the fast side, 2 milliseconds, medium 18 milliseconds, slow 75 milliseconds. So again, this is great for, that's great for like slower pads or softer sounds and stuff like that, just to so you don't, it just smooths things out, right? Also great for averaging compression, where you want to set like a very light ratio, set your ratio like 1.1 to 1 or very light, set the threshold very low and let it just kind of even a sound out. That can work incredibly well. Hard soft knee, right, for the way that the ratio is applied here. And then you have the new and old. So the new is a feed forward style VCA, which came later. The original was a feedback style, which kind of, the best way to describe it, like what you hear between old and new is that the old will have a warmer character to it. The new will have a cleaner, sharper, brighter character to it. So if you want something that's a bit more responsive, new. If you want something that sort of almost auto releases, because the output of the amp feeds back into the sidechain circuit, and therefore it's like the release almost adapts to the audio signal that's going through. So you'll find that the release is less responsive often in the old mode, but when you listen to it, it'll sound as like kind of a warming character is mostly the way that I hear it. So if I want something to really, kind of sharpen a sound, I'll go to new. If I wanted to kind of warm something up, I'll go to the old setting. It's pretty much a good way to go about it. And then you got your release time from 50 milliseconds up to 3 seconds. So pretty straightforward there. And pretty cool. The EQ section, what they've added in here, because most of this is the same as before, a couple things they added in. You can make it pre-dynamic. So when you put it in, it will make the EQ occur before the dynamic section, whereas normally it would be after. And then you also have 2 types. So you basically get the 560 emulation here with all the available frequencies, or you can work with the 550 emulation. And so that gives you just 2 possibilities there, and you can assign that into the dynamic sidechain. So just like this, you can assign, there we go, now it's on. You can assign the filters, the EQ, or both the filters and the EQ into the sidechain of the dynamics. And if you make this, you can make, even if you're not using it there, you can make it pre or post dynamic in terms of the just in terms of the audio signal. So if you want to do it where you EQ first and compress afterwards, that sometimes works really well when you aggressively EQ, use the compressor to sort of glue the sound back together. So you have that option. So that type button, that's a new feature, and that's cool because it gives you another option in terms of the way that you're working with the EQ. Love the 560. It's great, amazing in certain situations, especially with like guitars and stuff like that. We have an output meter, and this is the dynamic sidechain link. So what this does with the compression on stereo channels, if you turn it on, then it will link the left and right sidechain, internal sidechain. So essentially, if the left side signal threshold is exceeded, it will compress equally on both sides. If you leave it off, then essentially what happens is that you will make the left and right independent, so they will compress. So if there's a lot of stereo information that goes back and forth between the 2 sides, the compression will sort of follow that side. Sometimes it can create weird sounds. Sometimes it can make it sound really cool, whichever sounds best. And then obviously here's the bypass for the whole module here with the power, and then you get the fader here, and looks like, yeah, it says UAD. I was wondering if that said PNG because I'm not actually sure what the actual fader that they actually use on the API Vision consoles, which company that they actually use. But that's it in a nutshell. So far, sounds great. You'll hear in the first part of the audio examples, you'll hear it compared to the legacy version, because if you already have the legacy version, you say, is it worth upgrading to? That will be the video to watch to tell you whether you actually should go ahead and make the purchase. And we'll take a look at it that way. So that's basically it for the features video. Not much else to go over with that. The rest is just about hearing what it sounds like. So that'll be a separate video. All right, that's the plugin of the week from Universal Audio, the API Vision Channel Strip Features Overview.